Sometimes the most powerful transformations happen when the world has already written you off. When whispers fill the corridors, when former allies turn their backs, and when every door seems permanently sealed shut. This is the story of Colonel Sarah Mitchell, a brilliant military strategist whose career appeared to crumble in a single, devastating moment. While everyone else saw an ending, one four-star general saw something different entirely. He saw potential where others saw failure, strength where others saw weakness, and a future where others saw only the past. What happened next would not only resurrect a career but redefine what it means to rise from the ashes of public disgrace. This is a story about second chances, unwavering belief, and the extraordinary power of seeing beyond the surface when everyone else has already made up their minds. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Pentagon courtyard as Colonel Sarah Mitchell walked through the familiar corridors one last time as a respected officer. Her polished boots echoed against the marble floors, each step a reminder of the 15 years she had dedicated to serving her country. At 38, she had already achieved what many considered impossible for a woman in the military. She held 2 master's degrees in strategic studies and international relations, had served 3 tours in Afghanistan, and was widely regarded as one of the most brilliant tactical minds of her generation. Sarah's office on the 4th floor overlooked the Potomac River, a view she had earned through countless 18-hour days and sleepless nights analyzing intelligence reports. Her walls were lined with commendations, photographs with world leaders, and strategic maps marked with her successful operations. Colleagues often sought her expertise on complex international situations, and her recommendations had influenced major policy decisions. She was being considered for promotion to brigadier general, a milestone that would make her one of the youngest female generals in military history. But all of that changed on a humid Tuesday in July. The mission had seemed routine at first. Intelligence reports indicated a high-value target was meeting with known terrorist operatives in a compound outside Kabul. Sarah, serving as the Strategic Operations Coordinator, had spent weeks analyzing satellite imagery, intercepted communications, and human intelligence reports. Every piece of data pointed to the same conclusion: this was an opportunity to capture someone who had been evading coalition forces for over 2 years. Sarah had meticulously planned the operation, considering every variable she could imagine. Whether conditions were favorable, the target's security detail appeared minimal, and her chosen approach route would minimize civilian exposure. She had run through the scenario dozens of times, consulting with field commanders and adjusting tactics based on their input. The mission received approval from multiple levels of command, with Sarah's strategic assessments serving as the foundation for the entire operation. The initial phase went exactly as planned. Special Operations Forces moved into position under cover of darkness, communications remained clear, and surveillance confirmed the target's presence. Sarah monitored the operation from the Joint Operations Center, coordinating between multiple units and providing real-time strategic guidance. Everything was proceeding flawlessly until the moment it all went wrong. The explosion occurred at 0347 local time. What intelligence reports had failed to reveal was that the compound also served as a temporary shelter for displaced families from a nearby village that had been evacuated due to fighting in the region. The building that Sarah's analysis had identified as a terrorist meeting location was actually housing 12 innocent civilians, including 4 children under the age of 10. The aftermath was devastating. International media descended on the scene within hours, broadcasting images that would forever be seared into Sarah's memory. Local officials condemned the attack, human rights organizations launched investigations, and political leaders from around the world demanded accountability. The mission that was supposed to demonstrate precision and strategic excellence instead became a symbol of military failure and civilian tragedy. Sarah found herself at the center of an international controversy that threatened to damage diplomatic relationships and undermine ongoing peace negotiations. Her phone rang constantly with calls from reporters, investigators, and politicians demanding explanations. The Pentagon's Public Affairs Office worked around the clock to manage the crisis, but the damage seemed irreparable. Internal investigations began immediately. Sarah cooperated fully, providing every document, communication, and analysis that had informed her strategic assessment. She explained her methodology, walked investigators through her decision-making process, and, within the Pentagon, the reaction was swift and decisive. Sarah was immediately reassigned from operational duties to a desk job reviewing historical case studies. Her security clearance remained intact, but her access to current intelligence and operational planning was suspended pending the completion of the investigation. Colleagues who had once sought her advice began avoiding her in the corridors. Meeting invitations stopped arriving, and her input was no longer requested for strategic planning sessions. The isolation was perhaps the most difficult aspect of the entire ordeal. Sarah had built her career on collaboration and strategic thinking, constantly engaging with diverse teams to solve complex problems. Now she found herself alone in a small office, reviewing decades-old operations that had no bearing on current military challenges. Her expertise, once valued and respected, seemed suddenly irrelevant. Her family struggled with the public scrutiny as well. Her husband Mark, a civilian engineer, watched helplessly as his wife's reputation was systematically destroyed in the media. Their 2 teenage children faced questions and comments from classmates who had seen their mother's name in news reports. The family that had always been proud of Sarah's military service now found themselves defensive and isolated. Months passed with no resolution to the investigation. Sarah continued reporting to her desk assignment, maintaining her military bearing and professional demeanor despite the circumstances. She knew that her career, as she had known it, was effectively over. Even if the investigation eventually cleared her of wrongdoing, the political reality was that she had become too controversial for significant command positions. The promotion to brigadier general that had once seemed certain was no longer even discussed. Friends and mentors began suggesting that she consider early retirement or transition to private sector consulting. The message was clear: her time in military leadership was finished. At 38, with decades of potential service ahead of her, Sarah found herself contemplating the end of the only career she had ever wanted. The weight of the situation began affecting her health. She lost weight, struggled with insomnia, and found herself unable to concentrate on even simple tasks. The woman who had once thrived under pressure and excelled at managing complex crises now felt overwhelmed by basic daily responsibilities. Medical evaluations suggested she was suffering from acute stress reaction, a diagnosis that only reinforced the perception that she was unfit for continued military service. As autumn arrived, Sarah had resigned herself to the reality that her military career was over. She began quietly exploring opportunities in the private sector, reaching out to former colleagues who had transitioned to defense contractors or consulting firms. The conversations were polite but not encouraging. Her association with the failed operation had made her name recognizable for all the wrong reasons. It was during this darkest period that an unexpected message arrived. Sarah's secretary informed her that General Robert Harrison, a 4-star general known for his unconventional approaches to leadership and strategy, had requested a meeting with her. Harrison commanded respect throughout the military for his successful operations in Iraq and his innovative thinking about modern warfare. He was also known for his willingness to take risks on people whom others had written off. Sarah had never worked directly with General Harrison, though she had studied his strategies and admired his approach to complex military challenges. She couldn't imagine why he would want to meet with her now, when her career was in ruins and her reputation was damaged beyond repair. Nevertheless, she accepted the meeting, curious about what the general could possibly want from someone in her position. The meeting was scheduled for the following week, giving Sarah time to wonder about the general's intentions. Was this a courtesy call, perhaps an opportunity for him to deliver news about her future in the military? Was he conducting his own investigation into the failed operation? Or was there something else entirely that she couldn't anticipate? As Sarah prepared for what might be the most important conversation of her military career, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. 15 years earlier, she had entered the military with dreams of making a difference, of using her analytical skills and strategic thinking to protect her country and serve something larger than herself. Now, those dreams seemed shattered, her reputation destroyed, and her future uncertain. The woman who had once been considered one of the most promising officers of her generation now faced an uncertain future, wondering if her years of service and dedication had all been leading to this moment of professional destruction. Little did she know that the upcoming meeting would change everything, offering her an opportunity she never could have imagined and setting in motion a series of events that would ultimately prove that sometimes the greatest victories come from the most devastating defeats. General Robert Harrison's office occupied a corner of the Pentagon that few officers ever saw. The space was larger than most conference rooms, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the Virginia skyline. Unlike the typical military office decorated with flags and formal portraits, Harrison's workspace reflected his unconventional approach to leadership. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with titles ranging from ancient military strategy to modern psychology and business innovation. A large table in the center was covered with maps, reports, and what appeared to be game pieces from various strategic simulations. Sarah arrived 15 minutes early, as military protocol demanded, and was surprised when General Harrison opened the door himself rather than having an aide escort her in. At 55, the general carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned respect through decades of successful leadership rather than demanding it through rank alone. His gray hair was neatly trimmed. General Harrison began the conversation by acknowledging the elephant in the room. He had followed the investigation into the failed operation closely, not because he was officially involved, but because he made it his business to understand how strategic decisions were made and what could be learned from both successes and failures. His analysis of Sarah's work leading up to the operation had revealed something that most others had missed. The general spread several documents across the table between them, each showing different aspects of Sarah's strategic assessment. He pointed to specific sections where her analysis had actually been remarkably accurate based on the information available at the time. Her methodology was sound, her risk assessments were thorough, and her contingency planning was comprehensive. The failure had not been in her strategic thinking but in the intelligence foundation upon which all strategic decisions had to be built. What impressed Harrison most was not just the quality of Sarah's pre-operation analysis, but her response after the tragedy occurred. While others had sought to deflect responsibility or minimize their involvement, Sarah had immediately accepted accountability and the work would be highly classified, intellectually demanding, and critically important for national security. Sarah listened with growing amazement as the general outlined the scope of this new assignment. The unit would have access to intelligence from multiple agencies, unlimited resources for research and analysis, and direct communication channels to the highest levels of government. The work would involve collaborating with experts from universities, think tanks, and international organizations to understand threats that transcended traditional military categories. The position Harrison was offering would make Sarah the deputy director of this strategic planning unit, responsible for overseeing analysis teams and coordinating with senior leadership across the government. It was not just a career rehabilitation opportunity but a chance to engage in the most important strategic work being conducted by the military. The role would require her to draw upon all of her analytical skills while pushing her to think in ways she had never been challenged before. General Harrison explained that he had spent months evaluating potential candidates for this position. He needed someone with proven analytical capabilities, experience in complex operations, and the intellectual flexibility to approach problems from multiple angles. Most importantly, he needed someone who had demonstrated the ability to learn from failure and maintain integrity under pressure. Sarah's response to the recent crisis had actually made her more qualified for this role, not less. The general was frank about the challenges Sarah would face. The work would be demanding, the pressure intense, and the margin for error minimal. There would be those within the military establishment who questioned his decision to give her such a significant responsibility so soon after the controversial operation. She would need to prove herself all over again, this time in an environment where the stakes were potentially even higher than anything she had previously encountered. Sarah felt a mixture of emotions as she processed the general's offer. Part of her was grateful for the opportunity to return to meaningful work, but another part questioned whether she was ready for such responsibility. The failure in Afghanistan had shaken her confidence in ways she was still struggling to understand. Could she trust her judgment again? Would her analytical abilities be As she prepared to leave, the general handed her a thick folder containing background materials about the strategic challenges the new unit would address. The documents were classified at the highest levels, requiring her to review them in secure facilities, but they would give her a comprehensive understanding of what the role would entail. Over the following days, Sarah immersed herself in the background materials Harrison had provided. The scope and complexity of the strategic challenges facing the military were even greater than she had realized. Traditional approaches to national defense were proving inadequate in the face of hybrid warfare tactics, sophisticated cyber attacks, and the blurred lines between military and civilian targets in modern conflicts. The more she studied the materials, the more she realized that her experience with the failed operation, as painful as it had been, had actually provided her with insights that would be valuable in this new role. She understood the limitations of intelligence gathering, the importance of considering civilian populations in strategic planning, and the need for comprehensive risk assessment in ways that she had not fully appreciated before. Sarah also began to understand why General Harrison had chosen her specifically. The new strategic planning unit would be dealing with situations where incomplete information, ambiguous intelligence, and complex political considerations would be the norm rather than the exception. Their children were also supportive, though they expressed concerns about the continued high-profile nature of their mother's work. Sarah explained that the new position would be largely behind the scenes, focused on analysis and planning rather than operational command. The work would be critically important but would not subject the family to the kind of public scrutiny they had experienced during the recent crisis. By the end of the week, Sarah had made her decision. She would accept General Harrison's offer and take on the challenge of building and leading the new strategic planning unit. The work would be demanding and the pressure intense, but it represented an opportunity to use her skills and experience in service of her country in ways she had never imagined possible. When she met with General Harrison to accept the position, he was pleased but not surprised by her decision. He had recognized something in Sarah that she was still discovering about herself, the ability to transform failure into wisdom and adversity into strength. The qualities that made her valuable to the military had not been diminished by the failed, but, for the first time in months, Sarah felt a sense of purpose and possibility that had been missing since the tragedy in Afghanistan. General Harrison had seen something in her that others had missed, and now she had. The group included former military officers, PhD economists, computer scientists, psychologists, and regional specialists who spoke languages ranging from Mandarin to Arabic to Russian. Their ages ranged from recent graduate school graduates to seasoned professionals with decades of experience. What they shared was intellectual curiosity, analytical rigor, and the ability to think creatively about complex problems. The team's first major assignment came sooner than anyone expected. Intelligence agencies had detected unusual patterns of activity across multiple regions that didn't fit established threat categories. Cyber attacks were being coordinated with economic manipulation, social media disinformation campaigns were being synchronized with political pressure on allied governments, and military exercises were being conducted in ways that suggested preparation for entirely new forms of conflict. Traditional military analysis had treated these activities as separate issues, assigning them to different departments and agencies. Sarah's team approached them as components of a comprehensive strategy that required understanding the connections between seemingly unrelated events. She organized the team into interdisciplinary working groups, each responsible for analyzing different aspects of the emerging threat pattern. The breakthrough came after 3 weeks of intensive analysis when Dr. Jennifer Chen, a computer scientist studying the cyber attacks, noticed that the timing of various incidents corresponded with economic data releases that had been flagged by the team's economist, Dr. Marcus Rodriguez. The pattern suggested that someone was using cyber capabilities to manipulate market reactions to economic information, potentially destabilizing entire regional economies. Sarah recognized that this discovery was significant, but she also knew that her analysis needed to be bulletproof before it could be presented to senior leadership. The memory of the Afghanistan operation remained fresh in her mind, serving as a constant reminder of the importance of thorough verification and careful consideration of alternative explanations. She pushed her team to challenge their own conclusions, bringing in outside experts to review their methodology and test their hypotheses. The team worked 18-hour days for 2 weeks, building a comprehensive analysis that traced the connections between cyber attacks, economic manipulation, and political pressure. As Sarah began her presentation, she drew upon every lesson she had learned from her previous experience. She was careful to distinguish between what the data clearly showed and what remained uncertain. She presented alternative explanations for the patterns her team had identified and explained why they had rejected those alternatives. Most importantly, she was explicit about the limitations of their analysis and the areas where additional intelligence would be needed to confirm their conclusions. The 40-minute presentation covered the team's methodology, their key findings, and their assessment of the implications for national security. Sarah's analysis suggested that traditional military and intelligence responses would be inadequate for addressing this new form of hybrid warfare. Instead, she recommended a coordinated approach that combined economic, diplomatic, cyber, and military capabilities in ways that had never been attempted before. The questions that followed were intense and probing. Senior officers challenged Sarah's assumptions, questioned her methodology, and demanded clarification on complex technical details. She answered each question directly and completely, acknowledging when she didn't have sufficient information and explaining how her team planned to address remaining uncertainties. Her responses demonstrated not only mastery of the subject matter but also the intellectual honesty and analytical rigor that her experience had taught her. The reaction from the Joint Chiefs was immediate and positive. General Patricia Williams, the first woman to serve as chairman of the Joint Chiefs, commended Sarah's team for identifying a threat that had gone unrecognized by traditional intelligence analysis. General Michael Thompson, who had initially been skeptical about Sarah's appointment, admitted that the briefing had changed his understanding of modern strategic challenges and praised the innovative analytical approach her team had developed. More importantly, the Joint Chiefs authorized immediate implementation of Sarah's recommendations. Resources were allocated for expanded intelligence collection, diplomatic initiatives were launched to coordinate with allied governments, and new cyber defense capabilities were deployed based on her team's analysis. Sarah found herself at the center of a coordinated national security response that drew upon agencies and departments throughout the government. The success of her first major analysis led to additional assignments of increasing complexity and importance. Sarah's team was tasked with developing strategies for addressing climate change as a national security issue, analyzing the implications of emerging technologies for military capabilities, and preparing contingency plans for scenarios that had never been seriously considered before. Each assignment pushed the team to develop new analytical methods and collaborate with experts from fields far beyond traditional military and intelligence communities. Sarah's approach to leadership had been fundamentally shaped by her earlier failure. She insisted on rigorous verification of all conclusions, encouraged team members to challenge conventional thinking, and maintained an environment where questioning assumptions was not only permitted but required. She held regular sessions where team members were expected to present the strongest possible arguments against their own conclusions, forcing everyone to confront weaknesses in their analysis before presenting findings to senior leadership. The transformation in Sarah's professional reputation was gradual but undeniable. Articles in professional journals began citing her team's innovative analytical methods. She was invited to speak at conferences on strategic analysis and hybrid warfare. Senior officials from allied governments requested briefings on her team's findings. The woman who had been professionally destroyed just 2 years earlier was now recognized as one of the most innovative strategic thinkers in the government. The personal transformation was equally significant. Sarah's confidence had returned, but it was different from before. Her earlier success had been built on an assumption that thorough analysis and careful planning could prevent failure. Her new confidence was based on the understanding that failure was always possible, but that learning from failure and maintaining integrity in the face of adversity were more valuable than an unblemished record. General Harrison watched Sarah's development with satisfaction, but in his remarks, he spoke about the importance of giving talented people second chances and the value of leaders who had learned from failure. In her acceptance speech, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She spoke about the importance of integrity, the value of diverse perspectives in strategic thinking, and the responsibility that comes with leading people who are serving something larger than themselves. She also acknowledged the tragedy in Afghanistan and the families who had been affected, noting that their sacrifice had taught her lessons that made her a better leader and strategic thinker. The woman who had once been written off as a failed officer was now recognized as one of the most innovative and effective strategic leaders in the military. Her work had influenced how the government approached hybrid warfare, emerging technologies, and complex international challenges. More importantly, her leadership had demonstrated that failure, when met with integrity and humility, could become the foundation for greater success than had previously seemed possible. Sarah's story became a case study in military leadership programs, not just for her analytical innovations but for how she had transformed professional failure into personal and professional growth. Young officers, those lessons informed every decision she made, every analysis her team conducted, and every recommendation she presented to senior leadership. The failure that had once seemed to end her career had actually prepared her for achievements that exceeded anything she had previously imagined possible.